Well, there we are. The signal on the screen says the event is on air. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Williams, the host of the Find Your New Normal weekly broadcast on dealing with those issues that people face when they're in crisis. Those of you who've been following us, you know we're in the third season, and we've been talking about a lot of information the last few weeks as we began this season. And as those of you who are familiar with us know that I am so grateful to have my friend and I call her openly my guide, Sheila Schultz, who's beside me to guide us through the discussions that we've been having. Hi, Sheila. Good to have you here again.
Hi, Dave. I'm so glad to be here. I am Sheila Schultz. I have a company called A Quiet Mind, and I help people move through transitions in their lives, adapting to change and coping with stress. And this has been such a great show this season. We've had fabulous discussions with wonderful guests. And today we're kind of reevaluating, looking back a little bit on some of the discussions and maybe diving a little bit deeper. And I see some people have joined us again on the call. So let's dive in and see what we find out.
Yeah, I'm very curious of what the real questions are. I'm the analytical type, so I've been writing things down through each of our broadcasts. It's just I'm so curious about the topics that we've been dealing with, and openly am confused by a lot of the things that we're talking about. I think a lot of people out there may fall into my camp. As I've told you, Sheila, you're very comfortable with the lessons that you've learned in life and are excellent at sharing that wisdom. I would not have had my personal growth of it if you had not been by my side. And meeting others who have joined us, Dave Bennett, who came in a couple of weeks ago talking about what near-death experiences are all about, and Patty Burgess, I see, is in the audience. Patty, will have you on in just a minute when you're ready. We're really talking about transitions, again, strangely enough, into this topic of managing death and end-of-life days. Patty is an end-of-life specialist. And to back it all off, we've had Dr. Shani Fox, and I think Shani's there in our audience as well, who's a professional working with people in stress, primarily cancer patients. And she brought in this whole issue of managing perhaps what you think is a loss of control as you are dealing with your crisis. And one of the topics that I want to ask her about. And so I'm just giving you a hint, Shani, that I got to ask you, are you sure I didn't lose control? Because as a cancer patient, I understand maybe I didn't, but I think I did. And if I didn't, why didn't I? And if I did do that, did I get it back? It's who's on first, who's on second? It's one of those confusing
Good luck,
things.
Shani.
Yes. You and I, Sheila, set it all up on the very first broadcast where we were sort of talking philosophically, waxing philosophically about what is this whole arena of crisis about and coping with it, and primarily finding peace. And as I shared to the audience, that was really, I was egging that on. I only found finally what I would consider a moment of peace in September this year, after 3.5 years of struggling through cancer treatment and recovery. I found what I call my sandbar, not really acknowledging that I found my shore and get on with my life, but I knew I had to find a new normal, and had tried to keep my head above water for months after months, and through crisis after crisis after crisis, a very complicated journey. And it threw me off whack because, like those of you watching the show, it's not about just managing the crisis. It's about recovering from the crisis and getting on with your new normal. It took me a long time to figure out you don't go back to where you were. You've got to redefine a new world for yourself. And again, to honestly, everyone knows, I had conceived or had a personal label as Digital Dave. I was the guy who was knowing about digital marketing and technology and would help people in business trying to move forward. And because of the way I handled my cancer treatment, I just dismissed some skills and attitudes of who I was, what my identity was, what I wanted to be. Some of you may recall I used the term, I had taken apart my life blocks, my Lego life blocks had been disassembled, and I had to put them back together again. And the concern that I had for the last couple of years is how to create a new persona, a new identity, a new role for myself that was consistent with some new values and attitudes and beliefs that I had. And literally only a few months ago that I finally looked into the wardrobe, pulled out the suit of Digital Dave and started wearing it again. And now I'm out there helping heart-centered coaches, trying to deal with technology to get their messages out to their world. So what we've been trying to talk about has been, what is it that you go through, not just from cancer, but if you lost your house in a hurricane, or you had a terrible divorce, or debt and bankruptcy, all these crises really knock you off. And it's not just coping with this crisis today, it's understanding you're being pulled into something ahead of you. And I do say pulled, and I'm going to ask everyone today, is that a true perspective that I have, that I'm not gently moving forward, I'm having to be pulled forward because I'm fighting a desire to go back, and I can't go back because there's no resemblance of my past world to where I'm at now. So let me stop there, because everyone does know I just meander away as I keep going. But let's have your comment, Sheila. Am I on track here that in truth, crisis creates a need to define a new normal, and you've got to move forward, and you're going to go through a personal transformation of some sort, and there's lots of issues you're going to have to deal with other than just dealing with the elements of the medical or physical or financial crisis that you're going through?
Yes, I think so. And there were a couple of thoughts that came up as you were talking, and really reminded me of when, at the beginning of my journey through my crises. And one is that I did a lot of writing at that time. I was journaling and writing down things. And you're saying being pulled really brought back this one image that I had. I wrote that I felt like I was being pulled through a car wash. One of those automatic car washes. And I got on, and I was being pulled through the track, and there's water, and there's things coming at me, and soap and everything. But here I was just being pulled through it, and sort of being asked to trust it. And I got to the point where I felt okay just sitting on that ramp, letting myself being pulled through, and letting everything hit me that would seemingly be tough on you, just the analogy of soap in your eyes and getting wet and everything else, and letting that be okay. And the second thing that came to mind that really helped me in my dropping off of the worry and really sort of making big sense to me was I realized that after I had losses, that what I believed was no longer true. What I really held close to being true indeed was not true. So it made me start questioning. And then as I got deeper into spirituality, for me, I realized that spirituality is without thought. So there's no thinking your way around it. There's no figuring it out, because it's mystical. That's what it's about. Otherwise we would have all figured this out, right? So it's nothing in your brain that you could figure out. It's this knowing, this wisdom that is, some people say, prior to thought or beyond thought. It's outside the realm of figuring it out. And once I got to that point, I thought, I don't have to figure it out. I can just sit in this, let the car wash pull me through, and see what happens next. And that's what I did to start this. So that's my
But you were open to that? You just see what's next? Did you have fear? Did you have resistance? I mean, it can't be, this is great, I'm in the car wash, let me just go see what I look like, all squeaky clean.
The thing that got me was the spiritual transformational event that happened in my life. And that's the one thing that Dave Bennett really, it resonated with me when we were talking to Dave Bennett, because he said, there's an overwhelming sense of belonging and peace and love. He used those words. And it's very hard to describe that feeling because there are no real words that I can describe it, but that's really close. that sense of belonging and peace is so overwhelming that it allows you to realize that that is it. So I'm willing to surrender. I'm willing to dive in and just sit in the car wash, because I know what that feels like, to be in that place, just to let things go. And it's such a tremendous feeling that why wouldn't I? Why would I go back to the life where I want to worry and stress over things and resist and fight and want to go, in a certain direction? I want to trust the car wash.
It's interesting because because we had an offline discussion. I was, like you, really interested in what David was saying that he had experienced, and that term of comfort through peace and love that surrounded him really caught me off guard, because I do understand the word of comfort, and I have now an understanding of what peace is and where you can find it. But I started to struggle with the word love. What is love that you're supposed to be moving to or feeling surrounded by? And, because it's not romantic love, it's not paternal love, it's not friendship types of love. It's a dimension that I don't think I have experience, and I'm trying to put not a definition, but a context around it. So it's, I know what people are saying when they're saying I'm dealing with this purity, this love. And Patty, I'm going to ask you that as well, because I know offline you and I have talked about it, and Shani, the same thing when you come on, because I think often the people who have gone through the journey have an understanding of what they've experienced and are struggling for words to describe it. And it's beyond words in some cases.
It really is. Really is.
And some of us who have not experienced it and don't understand the vocabulary get very confused. And that's what I meant at the beginning, saying, oh, this sounds really great. I think I want an NDE. This is really a neat thing. As long as I can come back, because I do know there's more that is yet ahead of me. But there was something that happened to David when he was there that made a remarkable change to his life. And by the way, he would really like to join us today, but he's doing another one of his major speaking engagements. Those of you out there don't understand how lucky we were to have found a time slot that fitted Dave's schedule. He is a renowned speaker on these topics and called in many different directions. And he has agreed he will come back and carry this perspective that he started sharing with us, because it goes in many, many directions. But the vocabulary is the confusion, because I think I understand that this is good, but I'm not sure what that is, and how would I even recognize it other than, if you've never seen a red light, you don't know what it is till you see the red light, and then it's shining at you. But it is hopeful but confusing for me.
Well, it's like you said, it is beyond words. It really is. It truly is. And love, to me, is about as close as you can get, or belonging, or interconnectedness, or oneness. That's what I wrote when I was journaling. The feeling I had was just tremendous oneness with everything, so that there was no distinguishing between you and me. There was no sense that there were two beings. And so that's the way it was for me. And kind of quickly to talk about the two other things, and then we're going to ask some questions to the audience. But Shani had mentioned in her interview with us about the emotional and mental realm really being overlooked when we're talking about caring for people and helping people. And I could not agree more. That is so fundamental, from children to adults to end of life to people in crisis. That is always overlooked for some reason. We're too busy doing other things to pay attention to our thoughts, to acknowledge our feelings, our emotions. And the thing that Patty brought up, which really ties in with what you were just saying, Dave, is she said that the emotions brought up in a very authentic situation are achingly beautiful. And that is it. I mean, really, that's another way of saying, it doesn't matter if it looks bad. You could be sobbing and it still feels achingly beautiful, if that makes any sense, which is why words don't make sense, because you could be in tremendous pain and the feeling is achingly beautiful. And you could see something some tremendously heinous act, and it's achingly beautiful. So there's that whole sacred space that exists depending, no matter what the situation is, and no matter what our brains, our minds are telling us, there's this realm where things look and feel very, very different than our minds tell us they're looking. So
you think it's a growth that you go through? Like when you say achingly beautiful, I've been thinking, where in my life have I experienced that? And I can't do that.
Well, the first time I did was with my dying father. So it was that moment. You know, I imagine for David, he never felt that feeling until he had the NDE. I can't speak for him, but that's the feeling I get. That tremendous moment of whatever you want to call it, some transition into a different, a shift in your life. But it usually is powerful. And like he said, it's usually something that is really vivid. I could remember details about that night with my father that are so clear, like it happened this instant. And it changed me. It changed me so that people could tell the difference. The next morning, people were saying, there's something different about you. So it's a moment. But I really don't feel like everyone has to go through that. Because there are
that. Like, I mean, take your example of you found a death transition to be achingly beautiful. I think of being in the hospital for months and months and meeting many people in suffering, many people on the verge of death, people getting, you know, the knowledge that you've got 6 weeks to live. And all of that was traumatic for me. It was overpowering for me. But it made me sad. It made me frustrated. It made a whole bunch of emotions and aching. I felt so sorry for other people. Right. But, you know, I think of this one woman that just had such an amazing, in fact, the two women, and I'll share both of the stories. The one woman who had what I call been the classic warrior that became almost a role model for me because she had been dealing with cancer for years and years and had lung cancer, had ovarian cancer, had liver cancer, it just progressed and progressed. And when I met her, she only had, a few weeks left, and the people around her were there for love and support, which was so different than the visitors to other patients that I saw who cared about their loved ones and wanted to be there. But the way they interacted with Mary was really at a different level, and I'm going to try and remember to bring that up with Patty because she's been with end of life. The end of life experience was real for those people. And I, as an outsider who knew nothing about her, was brought into that. And so I could empathize. In fact, I'm not ashamed or guilty. I had no compassion or empathy before cancer. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, it might have been 2, and now I probably got empathy and 100. I mean, just amazingly different because of those experiences that, brought me there. And right after, and I saw her pass, and that was a sad thing during my hospital stay to meet her and watch her make the transition. But at the same point, someone beside me who was an executive banking manager who had come in, who had been fighting cancer or had been fighting disease for a while and was in for high involved testing and had been there all day being run around for testing. And by 3 o'clock in the morning, she was crying out to everyone, tell me what's wrong, tell me what's going on. And the nursing staff didn't know what to do. And so they brought in the doctor on call for the night shift. And he just casually came in and said, I see you're really disturbing everyone, asking about your test results. You should really talk to your physician. But, since he's not available and you do really want the answer, I should just tell you it's unlikely that you have more than 6 weeks to live. And he just walked out of the room. And it was just overpowering for me to see that nonchalant attitude to the crisis this woman who is now thrown into. If he had just stayed around and watched this woman dissolve into a pile of tears to such a degree that almost every nurse on the floor at 3 o'clock in the morning came rushing in to comfort her, to hug her, that they had to physically move her out of the room so that she could move into another part of the hospital that was quiet, that she could get some sense of what had just happened to her. And that experience, again, had an enormous impact. She was right beside me with, a curtain drawn. I can't hear it. And I don't sleep that well anyways, and all this commotion. And then he walks in and he says this. It was just an amazing. So the impact of what you're saying is there. The empathy and compassion that you gain from that is unreal. I mean, it just flew into me. It just absorbed me. But I don't know if I'd say all of that was beautiful. I just can't.
Yes. Yeah. And that's just it, because it's my personal belief that you will never feel that unless you're completely present.
Yeah.
Unless you're shining in the light of your presence on that situation, which always brings grace, which always brings peace, and it's okay underneath. So if you're upset about it, it means that you're not fully there. You're mad at the doctor. You're mad at what's going to happen to her. You're upset for her. You're thinking of something outside of what's right here.
Gotcha.
Instead of sort of creating that.
I was not in the moment.
Clearly, and that's more typical than not. Obviously, more people would act and react and respond the way you did, because. And until you get this sense of how this works, and that's what I learned in that moment with my dad. This was not his last day. It was the first day in the hospital, and he had 2 more weeks to live. But for some reason, something was brought to me in that moment where he was going through a lot of pain, for me to see that. And all of a sudden, it's like, it's always there for us to see. But for the first time in my life, that was revealed to me, and I felt completely there with him, and everything else fell away. All the pain, all the suffering, all the worries. So that is why it was important to me. And that's the lesson
I see that.
Yeah.
I've got to add on comment to that. But before I do, I just call out to Patty and Shani. If you're still there in the audience, you just want to put it in the text chat box that you're ready to come on camera, and we'll bring you in. You may have been just taking a break for a coffee or whatever, but Patty is
and
there,
also,
so that's great. And
Shani
is great, so we can bring them in. And, as they're making sure you've got your earbuds, my friends, so that we don't have a bunch of echo, make sure they're on and that you are using the Chrome browser so that you can join us without technical disruption, and why we're giving you a minute to do that. The follow-up to what you were just saying is, with Mary, watching the deterioration go by, now that you talk about where I was, the state I was in, living in the moment, it's really interesting in reflection, because I mentioned in a couple of shows back in the 2nd season that I was called Popsicle Dave, because my piece of the day was to not run, trust me, I wasn't running, but because I couldn't walk, I had to use that as a motivation to walk out to the kitchen area, get a popsicle, and bring it back. And because I was becoming empathetic, it was very strange. Instead of just saying, Dave needs a popsicle, he's going to go out there, I would start to ask the other people that I had become friends with, do they want a popsicle? And some of them weren't allowed to have popsicles, some were. But with Mary, it was amazing when Popsicle Dave asked her. The smile that came on her face was something I'll never forget. She really, just blew me away in terms of taking me right to that moment where she connected with me, where all the other patients acknowledged my presence and so forth. But it was as if I was getting a hug from a person who couldn't move, wasn't there.
Right.
But she was emoting something when I went, and when I asked her and she gave me that smile, when I brought it back, it was like she just enveloped me. And that's what I would say. I was in the moment at that point. I was not anywhere else. I was connected right with Mary. And that was, again, an overpowering thing for me to experience.
And as soon as you drift, and even if she had gone through a very tough period right that second, I would say that if you were stayed in the moment and don't let your fear and worry over what's happening take you to the next moment, you'd still be at peace. You would see it as achingly beautiful, even if it wasn't, even if she began hemorrhaging or something terrible was happening. So Oh, there's Shani.
Yeah, we've got Shani in, and Patty, I've sent you the invitation, and here comes Patty. So there you go, the four of us, the quadrant, the Brady Bunch. Here we are.
Oh no!
And we don't have name tags on the screen, so let's everyone introduce themselves. Patty, you're over somewhere on the screen. When the replay, it's always different, but there's Patty.
Hi there.
And that means that Dr. Shani Fox is the fourth member of our group today. Thank you for coming in.
Sure. Glad to be here.
So Sheila and I have been just jabbering, trying to make some sense out of all this great content that you guys shared with us over the weeks. Any thoughts that jump at you that you think you want to immediately respond to?
Yeah, actually, do you want me to start?
Sure.
Yeah, it was interesting when you started out talking about these losses, and Dave, you were asking Sheila, well, like, how do you do that? Did you just, stay there in the car wash and get, beat to death by those chamois? Actually, I kind of wish I could do that now that you've offered up that visual. But it was reminding me of how sometimes it looks and we always talk about our losses, we tend to after the fact. So when we look back at somebody else's losses, we think, oh, well, they just we're okay with that. I can't speak for Sheila, but I can speak for me and my losses. I can tell you, I probably pushed and pulled and did everything I could that used to work when I was going through my losses. And they've been, many throughout the years, some much bigger and monumental than others. But during all of those times, it's like I do get up-leveled to a new normal each time. But each time, I keep going back and pushing and pulling and prodding and poking and saying, well, this used to work, and why doesn't it work anymore? And it's kind of like God's Spirit, whatever it is, doing for me what I would never have chosen for myself, which is, you know what, Patty, it's time to move on. It's time to grow up spiritually. It's time to get bigger and just be out there more, whatever that means. And so something is dying, and that feels uncomfortable. And so I'm not saying that now I'm an expert at, oh, there's the car wash, let me on in, It's not like that. I still will be like slapping, pushing, and have claw marks on the side, like a cat trying to get through the, I'm not going.
Yeah.
And then I finally get drawn in because that's what Spirit wants. And I'm in, I get beat up, I'm not happy, but somewhere along the line, it's either go for this ride or go back out there again and keep pushing, and it's exhausting. So finally, the surrender, I think, happens for me, because I don't learn that quickly. It happens when I'm exhausted, when I've said, I can't do this anymore, nothing's working, and then I just sit. It happens like a tumbleweed, just go with it, and then the next thing you know, you pick up these cool things in your tumbleweed self, like, whoa, what's that? It's like new. And so then you get polished, new, and you're out there for the next thing. And I think to the day we die, and death itself is that experience. Many of us are at the doorway, holding on, go, I'm not going, but we're going to go. So I'd like to get more practiced at that kind of thing. And I think people don't, when we hear it sounds so good, people just don't show up all polished, shiny, and new. They've got a couple of good scars underneath that, that patina. So.
And it's how do you take that feeling or that knowledge to today? I mean, one of the things that you were talking about is don't wait till end of life to clean out the wardrobe, get rid of the masks, that you can find your new normal after crisis and wear a new, more authentic self. And I think, Shani, you were saying the same thing, is that authenticity is where we've got to be. It's how do we get there?
Yeah, there's no easy answer to that, of course. But what I always notice is that when a person is coming from some part of themselves which is not fully authentic for them, there's a tension there, that if they're willing to let go and just be okay with who they want to be or what they want to do or what they want to think even, then that alignment removes a lot of the tensions in the situation. So, I'm always looking for that, or helping people look for that, just because they feel, we're all talking about how we fight this. We do. We all do. I do too. And yet it's when we just are able to come back to, okay, so I see a lot of things going on here. What's most true for me? If that's always going to be the calmest place in the storm. And this, it is a storm. There's no denying that. But that's how I help people come back to some sense. Earlier you mentioned this question of, did I lose control? Did I not lose control? And all these metaphors that we're using here, car wash and everything else. I mean, of course it feels like you're not in control. You're being pulled. You're being battered. It does not feel like being in control. The only place you can get, I still maintain that we have a center core that's very strong and very clear, and that the more we can reveal it to ourselves, the calmer we'll be in this situation. But with all that's going on, it's very easy to lose touch with that. And so, what I always maintain is we can get a sense of being back in control, but it's not that we can control the circumstances, but we can get a sense of controlling those things we can control. And then we also learn then where we need to surrender, where it's simply not going to be a matter of our control. So all these elements come together in some sort of way for everybody, but it's only when you have this combination of being okay with it and then surrendering what we can't control. That's the only place where peace exists.
I was going to say, Shani, that's really interesting. You say that in the term control. I actually think that it's only been the illusion of control up to that point where then we say we've lost it only because it's different. But the more authentic you get, the more, as Shani said, that I think the more you want to lose this sense of control and clamping down and constriction, because that's not really in control. That's just limiting. It's like I'm in limit instead of in control. My personal opinion.
Yeah, you're making a very good point, actually. And control is not an ideal word for this. It's how people describe that situation. I want to feel back in control. Yes, I agree that we're never really in control. It is an illusion of control, but it's the calm, the peace of mind we're looking for, really.
Right, and I think it's like empowerment. Do you think so, Shani? It's this feeling that you have power that you're not aware of. So it's not like you can control things, but inside at your core, there's this power that you're unfamiliar with before you get to this stage in your life. And all of a sudden you recognize this power, and you get to the power by letting go. You get to the power by surrendering to what is. That's sort of, I don't know if that makes sense to both of you.
Mm-hmm.
It makes perfect sense to me. I'm constantly reminding people who have gone through cancer that, what did it take for you to get to where you're sitting right now? You felt weak, you felt vulnerable, but by God, you made it. Look at the strength it took. No matter what you felt like at the time, here you are. You have all this strength in you that only came out and only became apparent when you were laid so low. So that is strength, and furthermore, the wisdom you gain along the way. So yes, I believe that power grows, but of course, it doesn't match our concept of what power is.
That's right. That's
so
right.
Right.
That's why words are terrible. Words are so tough.
Yeah.
Well, those words
funny.
actually give you a life philosophy that changes how you're going to behave. I mean, one of the things that Sheila shared with me way at the beginning when I met her was that when you feel that you're in that moment of crisis and you really want to give up, don't, because where you're finding yourself is exactly where you're supposed to be. And I didn't get that forever. And then suddenly it became really a good philosophy that I am where I'm supposed to be at all times. And now what do I want to do with that? But it was a very tough concept to try and put myself in this idea that I'm not really, I have free will. I have the ability to make choices that are going to give me the ability to find happiness, that those choices that I'm making are mine. And that's my control of what is it that I'm choosing to do. whether it's all I can get is a popsicle, well, that's okay. That is maybe not where you want to be, but you are there, and that's good for you, and you'll discover that. Trust me, people in our audience out there, eventually it all starts to make sense that this is the way. It's like gravity. I don't understand gravity, but I know it exists. Well, there are certain spiritual laws, life laws, that I'm now discovering. It just works that way. And the sooner you get into sync with this, man, does your life change.
Well, yeah, and it becomes I think a knowing versus a belief. Like, I think it all starts out from, like, I hope this happens, to I believe this can happen, which is, to me, a step further along the way. And then when you have the experience of it, like you have, Dave, and Dave, probably you're one of those kind of people who maybe is a little bit more in your head, and it might have taken you a little bit. Yeah, it might have taken you a little longer, but that's okay. We're all, as you said, we're all where we are. But I notice, and it's beautiful, because there are many people who lead with, head versus heart. But look at you now. You led, and you kind of were on the door jamb with your fingers, placed very squarely. You got brought through, and now you said compassion went from a 2 to a 12. Amazing. Yeah. But you now have the knowing. It's the knowing, and no one can take that away.
And can I add one thing
too? One of the things you said is that suit of clothes and the mask that you have is one of the things, again, I didn't understand, is that there are people that I met, Sheila being one of them, that would enjoy going out into nature and looking at everything around her and being in sync with all of that. And I didn't know what that was. But now I see things around me that I resonate with, and I'm amazed. I love the pictures, Patty, that you're doing of your cats. I'm looking at that, and I either get happy or I get sad, and I'm saying, where's this coming from? What am I resonating with? So if you suddenly become empathetic and compassionate, those are something that you now need to package up in some way and deal with, because you're going to be bombarded with all kinds of different reactions to life around you.
And I think Shani has something to say, but before I want to step back just 1 second, Dave, because this thing that you brought up about free will is really interesting to me. And it really, to me, represents living in the moment, living in the present moment is the only place where you completely have free will. And I sort of explain myself, because people will say, well, there are a lot of terrible people in the world. And they have free will, but you know what? When you're not conscious, when you're not living for right here, right now, you don't have free will. You can't see that. It's unavailable to you. But as soon as you are that authentic, living in the moment, very present being, you have all the free will in the world. So that makes any sense. And now we can jump into, I know Shani wanted to comment.
Yeah, that's all right. But I will agree with you on that one. That what we're doing often when we're scared is we're creating future scenarios, and we can imagine them, but there's really nothing we can do about them other than imagine them and associate emotions with them. Whereas, our power is absolutely in the present moment. That is the only place we can make any changes or choices that will have any effect. So yes, I totally agree with you that is the place to aim for. Is that present? And I also loved how you said before, when we talk about the achingly beautiful situations, emotions, that you're right, only in the present. If your head is anywhere else, you'll miss them. Kind of like you were missing nature there, Dave, but now you see it. Very same thing with these moments.
But how do you learn to be in the moment? Let me rephrase that, because we understand what being in the moment is. What I'm finding is that life drama, the crisis that you find yourself in as a matter of living, constantly pushes you into the past and in the future. I'm thinking as I speak to you now, we had Canadian Thanksgiving last weekend, and as often happens with family get-togethers, there's discord. And in the past, when I've been in those situations, I just jump in and choose sides and defend and get into it. This time, it was a totally different process. I felt myself being drawn into the fears of the past. actually being drawn into the arguments of what had happened, and then being pulled into, well, what's the consequence going to be way in the future they got to worry about? And I kept being bounced back and forth like a ping pong. It was a crazy thing until suddenly I said, wait a minute, I got to just get out of this being pushed around and just be centered here. And then, man, it was so easy to be there in that situation and not be in the drama. And it took everyone else off guard because they suddenly saw me behaving totally differently. And they stopped doing what they were doing. And the whole situation all calmed down. It was like I suddenly became the keel in the rocky boat and everything centered back in. And I said, what the heck just happened? How did that go? Because that's not something that I would have ever have done in the past. And yet now that's exactly what seemed to be the way I was coping with the stress and crisis of the moment. I had learned something about being in the moment, didn't know where the switch was to turn it on, and was being buffeted, but suddenly found how to put the keel in the water and find calm. That was an amazing experience.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up, because you had the ability, after all what you've been through, to get back to that place, that center. And all of a sudden, when you did, your whole world around you kind of got in line. For some people to say, how do I get back to that? That would be hard. And one of the things that I would recommend or put out there is to say, for those people who are whirling a lot of scenarios around in their brain, and they can't get back to that center, the only thing I would say is open up the possibility of other outcomes. Now, we all learn we're not supposed to, you know, kind of grab onto outcomes, but we all tend to go there. So if not, come up with some other outcomes that are just as likely. And you know, the dire, awful scenario that our mind first goes to may be just as, that might just be as likely as the amazing. I think of that in, for example, in business. If I'm talking with a client or a prospect, there's the possibility that they will become a client and they won't. But why the won't part rolls around in my head more than the other, I don't know. I think we're wired that way. So I do believe we can open ourselves up to the other possibility. And this was brought home to me in a really interesting way, because this was years ago, I was in a kind of a heated discussion with a friend of mine. And I remember saying something like, you know, trying to get out some of my thoughts. And I said, you know, I know you're probably thinking X, Y, Z. And he stopped me and he said, hey, listen, I know you've got a lot of thoughts rolling around in your head. Just pick the best one and hold on to that one. And I was like, okay. And it reminded me so much of what you're saying, is that the chaos, if we can't get there because we haven't gone through a loss, to know that when we get there, maybe we can just think about some other outcomes and really press our brains for some of that positivity.
So is this something that just becomes habitual? You know, they say 21 days of practice and then your new behavior is set. So do I need 21 days of stormy crisis and learning how to get centered, and then that becomes the normal way of doing things?
Dave does want the formula. Let's write that down.
What, me head centered? What are you talking about? I don't understand.
Well, you know, it's one of the reasons why when I talk to people, I let them know that sometimes I'm going to describe things that don't make sense to them. And I do that on purpose, because I want them to rewire the way that they always think. The way that they say 2 + 2 is 4. I might want to say, for today, 2 + 2 equals green, and just sit with that and be okay with that. And they'll be like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And that's really what we kind of have to do, because there is this whole space around the things in our lives that are stressing us out and worrying us. And whether it's a health crisis or a relationship or anything in your life, there's that. And then there's space around that. So why is it that we're so focused on that when there's a lot more space around the thing than there is the thing, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, look outside. And Patty, you were kind of bringing that up. What are some other scenarios? What are some other ways to look at it? Is there something else to see that you haven't seen before? When you look at the glass of water, you just assume that it's always, it's a green glass, it's got some water in it. Look again. What else is there? Or what do you not see? How's that? That's another way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
This is getting different, but it sort of changes the way your fixed, rigid thoughts that I believe are what gets us in trouble.
Well, and I agree, even to take it further, is that then that becomes a frequency or an energy signature out into the universe, and it becomes sort of self-fulfilling if we keep going down those same well-worn neural pathways. Then that's what our signature is, and then that's what we attract, and it becomes evidentiary after that. But if you can break somebody out, even if it's a struggle, because it is, I mean, they show you in the models of when you're breaking these neural pathways or these old habits, they're actually ungluing from each other and regluing somewhere else. That takes effort and energy. So there's no substitute for showing up and doing the work. It's like we can intellectually know, but we've got to go and one time see it different, and then maybe still be coached by that coached with that up to the 10th time. Then maybe the 11th we can get there on our own. But it is, I think, repetition till it finally becomes, and it's what you went through, Dave, for 3 years. I just know a little bit more about your scenario. Yeah. And so now all of a sudden you got compassionate at 12. But you were working on that unbeknownst to you, maybe many times throughout that.
Yeah, I didn't know it. And that's what I'm saying, is that there's so much that's happening that I'm not aware of that suddenly starts to seep in, and I become aware of it. And I find that odd, because I usually choose which clothes to wear, and suddenly new clothes are being put on me, and I'm reacting to the new me. And it's just growing. As you say, the brain is being reprogrammed. The neuroplasticity of the brain is there, and you're regrowing the neurons a particular way, but your old pattern still exists. So the example of Thanksgiving drama was the old pattern got triggered, and the new pattern came in and tried to push the old pattern away. But in normal day-to-day, I'm pretty comfortable now in choosing the way I'm going to handle what it is, because there's no stressor, there's no trigger that's reactivating this years and years of programming. And I'm finding that fascinating, that these new events, once you start to figure out what's happening around you, that sense of awareness actually rewires the brain, and now new approaches are taken, and that leads to this peacefulness that you're searching for. There seems to be a path, it may not be a formula, but there's a journey you can take, that if you start to be aware of the trees around you and the river that you're floating on, you can suddenly enjoy the journey a lot better than just being cascaded along through the rapids.
Absolutely.
This is an interesting discussion about considering alternate outcomes. I certainly subscribe to that as well. I think that's one way of getting there. And there's another possibility also, and this I gratefully borrow from Michael Bernard Beckwith, who will ask the question, how does God see you right now? Now, if you don't believe in God, source of the universe, doesn't matter. But the point is that if you're in a place where you're feeling fearful, you're feeling weak, you're feeling sometimes even resentful, or some of these other emotions that we don't really want to be dealing with, but we find ourselves there anyway. By taking an outside perspective for a moment, we come to realize that, okay, we're behaving in a certain way, but if it's God in question or the equivalent, all of a sudden you might get a glimpse of your core, who you really are at the core, which is a very different person from that surface person behaving whatever way they're behaving, arguing with the family or whatever. And just learning to be aware of that, asking that question over and over and over again, who am I being essentially in this moment? And and then becoming aware that there's other possibilities there. That also will sometimes, if we just get quiet with it for a moment, will then come out with something very different than what we might have said 2 seconds earlier. Mm-hmm. So that's another way that I use to help people get into that different place. place.
I love that. I love that, Shani.
I do
And
too.
whatever it is that you think of something greater power, something outside of you, it's very helpful. And it doesn't have to be anything that you've grown up with or something that someone has taught you, but there's something that you connect to. And whatever that is, and it could come through an animal, it could come through Patty's cat. But whatever that is, it's really important, I think, to have something like that, where you feel like there's something bigger than you that helps to grow your power, that gives you that support, that sees you differently than you see yourself. And another thing that I use a lot is when people are saying, and these are people a lot of times who are very religious or spiritual, but they're frustrated or angry at what is happening. And I really do believe in the Byron Katie version of, if it happens, it's necessary. And I want what God wants. So if you look at it that way, you're like, oh my gosh, okay. So if it's happening, it is happening because of a bigger power, for whatever reason. Don't worry about the reason. You don't have to get into the why. But then align yourself with that. And it's a tremendously liberating feeling to be able to let go of the I want this, when maybe what would be helpful is to want what God wants, what the universe wants, what is being presented to you. And it's tough to get there for a lot of people, but it's once you do, though, it is you go, oh, I don't have to take care of that anymore. I don't have to be in charge of what's happening right this second. I get to just align with it.
Yes, alignment.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
I don't have to be the boss of me.
Yeah, we really don't have to manage as much as we think we
It's
do.
exhausting.
It is.
And look at the statement you just made, I don't have to be in charge of it. And when you're okay with that whole feeling that we were talking about before of needing to be in control, no, it looks very different. Now we're in a different mission altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Well, certainly when David was talking about his near-death experience and trying to explain his visitation on the other side, and had tried to express that he is of the belief, as many of us are, that we are a spirit living a human existence, and the soul that we have, he was saying, was a shard of God's light and energy was presented to him when he was born. And so his center was connected to source. And I sort of listened to him, but then when Patty was talking about removing masks at end of life, it struck me this idea of what I experienced, because my son has a grandchild, or I have a grandchild. He has a daughter, and when she was born a year and a half ago, and I saw this little baby, pure, naive, virgin entity sitting there. There was just love. I mean, it was just beauty. It was just simplicity. It would be all God's energy, all Spirit's energy right at that moment. And then I was projecting what I experienced with my grandchild to what Patty was saying at end of life, where people are about to transition back to where they came from and are removing the entrapments of life. And Dave was saying, hey, wait a minute, in between the birth and the transition, there's life. And in life, you get opportunities to re-examine yourself, in his case, 3 near-death experiences, but was able to say, wait a minute, I still am pure love. My essence is that love that was there at birth and what is evident at death. Why do I have all these masks, all these things around me that, in my case, were there for protection? I mean, my armor was as thick as you could possibly have. It made me numb to life, and it took a serious disease to strip it all off so that essential Dave could now come forth and now start to find its place in existence. And I'm trying to restrict those suits of clothes, those entrapments that life is around me to protect me, to make me safe, to restrict that so that I can just be in the moment and enjoy life. And I'm saying, isn't that an interesting way to now put it all together? birth to death to life, masks, authenticity, balance, all trying to get the love, the joy, and the peace. And I'm sitting here saying, man, we're talking about some really great stuff. This has really got my attention.
That's it. Everybody should be talking. And I apologize, those cat videos, like that's a whole known universe at our fingertips. And I do post cat videos because he makes me happy.
It's great. It's great.
Well, I love them. Keep posting them. I am into them.
Whatever brings you joy, because it's bringing joy to other people too there, Patty.
That's right.
There you go.
Well, look at that. We're already at the top of the hour. So before we wrap it up, let me throw it back to you, Shani, and you, Patty, to number one, tell everyone again where to find you, because everyone, you've got groupies out there that are watching our replays and saying, who are these people? So, let's start with Shani. Tell people again where you can be found and your final comments of what you tried to share when you were with us and what you hope people would get from today's session.
Well, I'm Dr. Shani Fox, and I help people get back in charge of both their health and their confidence so that they can make the most of their new chance of life after cancer. I work 100% with cancer survivors, and you can find more about me at www.drshanifox.com. And I'm just thrilled that there are conversations like this going on, Dave, and that you're taking the time every single week to put this out, make this available to people. These are a lot of us have either not encountered this before, or even if we have slightly, we still may be hiding a little bit from these conversations. They're obviously not the norm. They're not any part of the conventional system of treatment around cancer, and it's such. I think they ignore this, as I say, at our peril. That there's no such thing as going through cancer without an emotional impact, and so being that it is, it's good to have a place where we can safely delve in like this and ask questions and explore, and we always benefit, like you say, this crisis or any other crisis, but with cancer it's absolutely the case that it's really important to have a place to explore. So I thank you and congratulate you for offering a place like this for people to do this.
Oh, and thanks for coming and sharing, because it is certainly on cancer. It is difficult to not just go through the treatment, but to recover. And no one talks about this. They all concentrate just on the disease and its extrication, but not about how you find your new normal. And that surprised the heck out of me when I suddenly discovered what I was stuck in. And that's why we do these shows and bring experts like you on who are living this journey with patients who are really out of their depth. And yes, to get lots of love and support from their family and friends, but there's a lot more to this that I've discovered, and I'm learning other people. I'm not alone. There's a lot of people, feeling the same thing. So thank you very much for coming. And over to you, Patty. Tell people where you can be found, what you do, and what your message was.
Sure. I am Patty Burgess, and I'm an end-of-life specialist. I offer training to hospices and to individuals who are looking to become end-of-life coaches, guides, or doulas. And they can find me at doingdeathdifferently.com. And that's for individuals, and teaching transitions for hospices and healthcare organizations. And basically, my whole thing is that none of us is getting out of this gig alive. We just aren't. However, when we do decide to go, most of us are going to have a pretty long trajectory from the time we know that we are ill to the time that we die. We can make the most of that time. We can enter end of life with a sense of understanding, a sense of dignity and grace, and maybe even awe. That's not only the person who is passing, but those who are the caregivers. And we know that there's a lot of stages to grieving and to dying, and that's not to say that this is just a cakewalk, but it's these kinds of conversations where we can begin to use Sheila's and my words earlier, see the achingly beautiful opportunities for meaning and for connection that many, because we're so fearful, many people shy away from those things and concentrate back on the fear again. There are other ways to look at this, like we talked about before, and that's meaning, connection, grace, comfort, of course, physical comfort, and maybe even with a sense of awe. And I can tell you that many of us have experienced the joy along with that. So that's what I do.
And I'm glad you do it. I'm glad you're here. And I know there's more to the mission that you have. And I'm to hope that you come back into the show, because one of the things I'm now very interested in and talking to our future guests is about this concept of the afterlife. That although, yes, we don't go out of here until we die, but if you have a perspective that there's more yet to come, I'm learning that really affects what you're doing now. You know, if this is it, your 90, 100 years, whatever you got, if you now said, I live forever, that changes your whole perspective. What am I doing now, and what should I be doing? And that just fascinating me as I'm talking to people who, you know, are saying, man, there's yet more to come. This is just a little tease at what your soul is all about. So I'm hoping that we can bring you back in.
Yeah, I call death, not everybody calls it this way, but it is a delicious mystery as far as I'm concerned. Even with the pain and even with whatever else that we face along the way, it's going to happen. So we do have choices. We don't think we do. We will die, but we have choices as to how we can approach that. So hopefully people will take those. And I thank you guys so much for these delicious conversations. They're really good. They're tasty, let me tell you.
Certainly making me think a lot and writing a lot. I mean, I'm so head-centered and I'm trying to be heart-centered, but man, this stuff
we'll get you
really
there,
blows me away.
You're all good. All good. Thank you so much for having us.
You.
It's lovely.
Thank you. And over to you, my good friend, Sheila. What's the takeaway from today?
Wow. It keeps getting better, Dave.
I know.
Keeps getting
better.
I'm
so excited. It's Christmas.
Well, like Shani and Patty, I am just so grateful that we have a community. And I really do believe that the community around the world is growing in this effort. People are becoming more cognizant, more mindful of this kind of thinking, mainly because we have to. You know, really, because if we don't, I think we're doomed, you know? So it's like, this is good. We're either all going to fall apart and we're going to dissolve and there'll be nothing left, or we start becoming aware of these things. And I know it's happening. I see it in grade schools, and people are developing programs for children. There are people like us, all four of us, helping people in crisis and caregivers, end of life. So I am really optimistic, and all of these sessions, all of these webcasts that we do just sort of feed me, and it makes me more excited to be doing what I do.
Well, and I'm glad you're here every week, because you make this show focused. I'm off there as the explorer trying to figure out what the heck is happening, and you're that person who helps it come together into something sensible. And that's what today was about. I hope those in the audience who will watch this on the replay, and there are hundreds and hundreds of you, which is really exciting to see so many of you watching the replays. Don't forget, you can always leave your comments on our Facebook channel, which is where most people are watching this, or back on findyournewnormal.com/live. You'll see the upcoming broadcast and past broadcasts there. We're very interested in responding to your comments. And if you are watching it on Facebook, please like it and share the post to people in your group to let people know that this session every week is going on. Some of the topics don't resonate with you. Some of them don't. But there is a theme. And hopefully today, Sheila and I have tried to bring that consensus of what the heck were the last 4 weeks all about. This was a way of synthesizing some, from what I found, mind-blowing concepts and getting it back to, so what do I need to do today? And how do I find my normal and living through the moment that each of us have to go through? So please join us next Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern. We've got another exciting guest coming on. In fact, when I'm looking at the next couple of weeks, there again some topics that'll take you in different directions, but all around all these issues that we all are struggling with when we find our life topsy-turvy. We're at the crossroads. There's a crisis, and we're calling out for peace. We want this contained in some way. So what do you do, and how do you find some comfort in being exactly in the place that you're supposed to be? I can't get that, but that's where we are, and that's what the message is. So I'm really grateful to have friends like you can see on the screen with me every week to share the message. So please come back next Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, to findyournewnormal.com/live, register, and watch the replays either on our website or on our Facebook channel. We're getting quite a group of people following us and lots of interesting replay content for you to view. So again, thanks to my guest today. It was really great to have you here. Most grateful too. Without you, we would have just a Sheila and Dave show. And,
which we've done.
much nicer to have more people giving us insight. So thanks all. And thanks to you out there for watching us. See you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.
And we're off the air.